Man, we need more self-aware isekai because Possibly the Greatest Alchemist episode 4 was comedy gold. There was things that made me raise an eyebrow, like did they just turn our cute adorable little spider into a hybrid, which has me conflicted to say the least because it creeps me out. It feels like something straight out of a horror film. I'm like, if I woke up and I saw this thing creeping her, I would be less scared of just a giant spider than I would of half human, half spider, but maybe that's just me. But overall, they played into the tropes and cliches hard. Probably harder than Takumi was this episode. They basically rolled with the most of these kind of isekai self-insert fantasies where the character's in a new world, now he's surrounded by busty women who, usually are oblivious to what he wants or he's just too turbo virgin out of his mind to do anything. They went hard with some of the most dumb and goofy shit they could do, only to have the women in question be so self-aware of how turbo virgin he was being, and they straight up call him a loser and a wimp. They don't like degrade the MC to be like, oh, he's a punching bag, but it's like, this was an episode that was like one or two steps away from being a straight up parody. Now, it wasn't a parody. It did take itself seriously, but there was enough elements and gimmicks that just made it so ridiculously fun that if you've seen a handful of these shows that do these types of episodes or help, it's not even episodes, it's usually like an entire goddamn show. But if you've seen the shows that do this type of formula and they like legitimately take it seriously and it's like, are you trying to make us think this is some cute romance? You know how boring and cringy it is. For me, this shit was just funny as hell. And legitimately, so many different moments throughout this episode that I'm like, okay, I really like what they're doing here. And there's so many little bells and whistles that just make this entertainment. Like just pure entertainment. And all the things that would normally be like eye roll worthy or clawing your face being like, what the hell infuriating bullshit is this? No, man, like all the things that are usually dumb in these shows, despite at face value it doing those very typical cliches, I think they had a blast with this episode and it shows in the pure entertainment value of this episode. Of course, if you want to support my work though and see my full thoughts to these episodes, we do have that Patreon where we have those full live reactions if you're so interested. So Takumi as a character, right? He's incredibly smart. And he's also driven by his own personal motivations. Like he mass produced a bunch of shitters and he's like, I want a brick. I want to go adventuring. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I mean, I get that. I mean, most people who have an understanding of summoning to another world probably at some point are going to be like, I want to try adventuring. And he's even smart enough to be like, hey, the girl who's clearly just a maid should probably stay behind. I'll take the one who's combat focused, of course, but yeah, she really wants to go. Her stats are okay. Sure. So he makes them some weapons and in the process levels up. And yes, over the course of the episode, we go past your typical adventuring plotline to I'm gonna make you underwear, which, the episode took a turn around the point when he was making them accessories for their weapons. So for a battle maid, she's using like short little daggers, throwing knives, stuff like that, and him being his horny ass that he was, is like, oh, battle maids need to have them on their thighs. Well, how would I get her information? Well, I have appraisal, and he makes exact replicas of their bodies. And it was at that moment that I knew the episode was not going to take itself too seriously. And I set my expectations up as such, and I just had a fun time because, I was expecting a lot more typical bullshit, like they would walk in on him, clearly having exact replicas and they'd like do their like dramatic face, like what a scumbag. Instead, they were mostly oblivious to how he got certain details, only for the end of the episode to be like, it was like a lingering joke. Like, what is their reaction going to be to him clearly being a bit of a horn dog this episode? And their reaction is, what a wimp. He's not doing what we clearly, and I'm like, okay, this show's like not too serious. Like, there's gonna be elements of seriousness, but the fact that even the goddess herself is looking down being like, boss man, my blessing coming undone has nothing to do with your women issues. Did I select the wrong person? That is funny to me. Maybe some people won't like it. They'll be like, no, this is too much. This is too much of a, turbo. It's like they clearly were taking the piss for a lot of it. And I don't know, like, because the dude has clearly shown more than just that energy. Like, this was the most kind of sexual-ish energy the dude's had in 4 episodes. For the most part, he's actually been pretty, like, mature, pretty strict. It almost felt like he was just having way more fun this episode, and in return, the comedic value of the show got cranked up a few notches. And there was so many like different moments. Like I thought it was just hysterical. Like this man was like so fascinated by. He's like, should I try on the pen? I'm like, what? Like where did that come from? Like he was just. It was so not serious, and I absolutely loved it. I just thought it was hilarious. We were like, if this episode was 5 or 10 minutes longer and they kept up the energy, I would have had tears of joy just laughing at this. It was just so fun. And surprisingly, decently gory. Now, not like, I'm not saying you're gonna be like flinching from the gore, but because they let the goblin blood be blue, I felt like they went a little more intense at moments. Now, this isn't gonna be the craziest thing you're gonna see, but it's kind of like the same thing of when you have, live action stuff. If the things you're fighting and killing aren't human, even if they're not like robots, like they're like a creation that is designed, but you're like, okay, that's clearly a humanoid looking thing, but you're calling it an alien, then they're allowed to blow it up and rip off limbs because it's not human. I felt like they got a similar thing across because they're goblins, but most importantly, the blood was blue. It kind of allowed a little more blood splatter. Now, not the entire time, but I did notice that there was a couple of times I was like, okay, that's actually surprisingly gory for what the show was setting up anyway. Like, not in the context of all anime, but like for a show like this, I felt at certain points it was. And, they also had a lot of comedic fun with kind of how terrorist they were being. Sometimes I feel this when we're like killing goblins or slimes in these shows where I'm like, maybe we're the baddies because like they're not really doing anything. It just kind of feels like we're being bullies. And they're out here casting giant magical walls of death, and I'm like, this kind of feels like we're just invading someone's home and being terrorist bombers. And I think the characters' faces themselves kind of acknowledge that, like, yeah, they're kind of intense. The whole episode was just ridiculous. It really was. And I appreciate that they're still like continuing the long-term plot, which is essentially ignoring the fact that, of course, we know now that the blessing's coming undone, time skip, stuff like that, whatever. But his current day story of pretty much like, hey, we need someone to fund our business. We need someone to do some protection, stuff like that. And this man deadass looks at him and says, hey, you cleaned up our streets. We are going to be able to avoid so much stuff. Can you, for the love of God, put yourself first? Like, value your life? Because you clearly are going to change our world. And he's just kind of sitting there thinking like, I'm going to make some underwear for these women later. I don't know. Maybe for some people, this episode will lessen their enjoyment because they'll just, like, I feel like some people are going to take this episode too seriously, when clearly this episode was an author just kind of taking the piss and just being like, hey, all these tropes and cliches that legitimately take these, like, virgin trope fantasies so seriously, we'll have our MC essentially taking it seriously, but everything surrounding it is going to be so not serious that is clearly just going to be 1 or 2 steps away from parody. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was hilarious as hell, and yeah, I'm very excited for more. Of course, you let me know what you're feeling down below. This episode was comedy gold for me, but let me know what you're feeling. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course, ring that bell, and like I mentioned, we got those full live reactions over on Patreon. Hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. Alright, so today we got Marco-san here in 12, Sean Cafferkey, Jessica L. Compton, Ishta, Eternally Lost, Mauve, and we also have Y'all Balgruff. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care. Have a good one.